Most people who add coffee grounds to their garden are actually making their soil worse, not a little worse, meaningfully worse. And the frustrating part is that they're doing it with the best intentions, following advice they found online, feeling like they're finally doing something right for their plants. That ends today. This isn't your fault. Nobody told you the full picture. The articles and short videos you've seen skip the part that actually matters. Not whether to use coffee grounds, but how the soil responds to them over time. That missing piece is exactly what turns a good idea into a problem. And it's the same reason so many gardeners give up on the whole thing after a few weeks and go back to buying bags of fertilizer they don't really need. By the end of this video, you'll have a complete 28-day method, week by week, step by step, that shows you exactly how to use coffee grounds to activate the biology in your soil, improve water retention, and support stronger plant growth. You can start this weekend with the grounds from your next pot of coffee. Right now, you've probably got a garden that fights you a little. The soil gets hard after rain. Water runs off the surface instead of soaking in. Your plants grow, but slowly, like they're working against something invisible. You add fertilizer, maybe compost, and things improve for a while, but the soil itself never really changes. It still compacts. It still drains badly. It still feels dead when you dig into it. By the end of this video, all of that changes. Here's something most people don't think about. More than 23 million pounds of coffee grounds are thrown away every single day in the United States alone. 23 million pounds. Meanwhile, gardeners across the country are spending money on soil amendments, trying to solve problems that a little biology could fix. That number isn't just about waste. It's about a resource that's sitting in your trash can right now, this morning, that your soil could actually use. The problem isn't access, the problem is method. When you dump dry coffee grounds directly onto your soil in a thick layer, which is what most guides tell you to do, something counterintuitive happens. The grounds compact together. They form a thin, almost waxy crust on the surface. Water starts to bead off instead of penetrating. Oxygen can't move through, and the beneficial microorganisms that were supposed to feast on that organic matter, they can't get to it. You've essentially created a barrier where you were trying to build a bridge, and that's not even the whole story. Applied incorrectly over time, coffee grounds can temporarily acidify your soil in ways that lock out nutrients your plants are already trying to access. Your plants look fine on the surface, but underground, the root environment is getting more hostile. You keep adding grounds because you believe in the idea. The soil keeps struggling because the method is wrong. That's not a nutrition problem. That's a biology problem. If you're already seeing this differently than you did 5 minutes ago, subscribe to this channel. I break down exactly this kind of thing every week. The gap between what gardening advice tells you and what actually happens in the soil. The real question isn't whether coffee grounds work. They absolutely do. The question is what has to happen first, what conditions have to exist for the soil to actually use them. And the answer to that question is where everything in this video begins. Long before anyone was buying soil conditioners at a garden center, farmers in coffee growing regions were doing something most modern gardeners have never heard of. For hundreds of years, in places like Ethiopia, Guatemala, and Indonesia, the byproducts of coffee processing were worked back into the land almost automatically. Not because anyone ran a study on it. Because farmers noticed that the soil around processing areas was different, darker, looser, more alive. That knowledge didn't disappear because it was wrong. It disappeared because it became inconvenient. When synthetic fertilizers became widely available in the mid-20th century, the focus shifted from building biology to delivering nutrients directly. Fast results, measurable results, feeding the soil instead of feeding the plant started to feel old-fashioned. Too slow. But the farmers weren't wrong. The biology was always real. It just got set aside. The people rediscovering this today aren't researchers. They're home gardeners who got tired of spending money on products that worked for a season and then stopped. And what they keep finding points back to the same principle those farmers understood centuries ago. The reason it works so well today is exactly the same reason it worked then. Living soil feeds living plants, and organic matter is what keeps soil alive. The 28-day method is that old idea applied with a little more precision than most people use. The method starts before you ever touch the soil. It starts with the grounds themselves. Most people grab the filter out of the coffee maker, hold it over the garden bed, and shake. The grounds land on the soil surface in a small clump. That clump is the beginning of the problem. Freshly brewed grounds are fine in texture, which sounds like a good thing, but it means they pack together easily. When they dry on the surface, they form that thin crust. When they stay too wet in a pile, they can develop the wrong kind of mold, the kind that competes with your beneficial fungi instead of supporting them. The first thing the method asks you to do is simple. After brewing, Spread the grounds on a flat surface and let them lose about half their moisture before applying. Not bone dry, just not soaking wet. You're looking for a texture that crumbles slightly when you press it. This takes 30 minutes to an hour. It's not complicated, but it changes everything that happens next. The second thing is about quantity. For a standard bed of 4 to 6 square feet, use no more than half a cup of prepared grounds per application. Spread evenly, then work lightly into the top inch of soil with your fingers or a small hand rake. Not buried, not piled. Just integrated into that surface layer where oxygen, moisture, and microbial activity are already highest. In the first few days after that initial application, something quiet begins. The bacteria and fungi already living in the soil start breaking down the organic compounds in the grounds. Caffeine, chlorogenic acids, lipids, releasing simpler nutrients that plants can eventually absorb. You won't see anything dramatic on the surface. The plants look the same, but underground, microbial populations start responding to the new food source, slowly at first, then with more momentum. This is the foundation of the whole process. You're not fertilizing yet. You're waking something up. And what happens during the second week of consistent application is where the first real visible changes begin to show. By the second week of consistent applications, something starts to show. Not dramatically, but if you're paying attention, you'll notice it. The soil color shifts darker where you've been applying the grounds. That's organic matter beginning to integrate, not just moisture. The texture changes too. Where the surface used to feel firm and resistant, it starts to give more easily. And when you water, it soaks in faster instead of pooling on top. Soil fungi are slow starters. Bacteria respond faster to new food sources, but fungi, the kind that form thread-like networks moving nutrients between soil particles and plant roots, take longer to establish. By the second week of small regular applications, those fungal networks start extending into areas where the grounds are being incorporated. They're not just decomposing organic matter, they're building infrastructure. The same infrastructure that will eventually connect your plant roots to a much larger web of nutrient exchange than the roots could access on their own. Here's where a lot of people make a costly mistake, right when things start working. Because the soil looks better, they assume more grounds will mean faster progress, so they double the amount. And within days, the pH in that top layer drops noticeably. Spent grounds typically fall between pH 6.0 and 6.8, close to neutral, but large quantities applied quickly release organic acids during decomposition that push the pH lower. For tomatoes, peppers, and most vegetables, that drop can lock out calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus even when those nutrients are already in the soil. You add fertilizer. Nothing resolves, because the problem isn't nutrition, it's chemistry blocking access to nutrition. Half a cup per 4 to 6 square feet every 3 to 4 days. That rhythm gives the microbial community time to process each application before the next arrives. It keeps the system in balance. If you want to go deeper on building soil biology at home, there's a complete guide in the description and pinned in the first comments. It covers composting, natural amendments, and everything that works alongside this method. Check it after this video. Right now, stay with me. Week 3 is where this gets genuinely interesting. By day 15 or 16, if you've been consistent, biological activity reaches its first real peak, and it becomes visible in a way you might not expect. Earthworms show up, not because you added them, because you created conditions they prefer: higher organic matter, better moisture, increased microbial activity. Their castings deliver potassium, phosphorus, and nitrogen in forms plant roots absorb almost immediately. Around the same time, your plants start responding in ways harder to ignore. Leaf color deepens. New growth appears faster. This isn't the grounds feeding the plants directly. Spent grounds contain roughly 2% nitrogen and modest amounts of other minerals. What's happening is more systemic. Improved soil structure reduces compaction around roots. Better moisture retention means roots aren't cycling through wet and dry stress. The fungal networks growing since week 1 are now actively moving phosphorus directly to root surfaces the grounds didn't feed your plants. They fed the system that feeds your plants. Week 4 is where you find out what the soil actually looks like when all of this comes together. I know what you're probably thinking right now. 28 days sounds like a long commitment for something you're not sure will work. And honestly, I thought the exact same thing. Before I figured out what I'm sharing with you today, my raised bed was the kind of problem you learn to accept. The soil had started compacted and stayed that way. Every spring, I'd break it up, add compost, and by midsummer, it would harden back into something close to clay. Water would sit on the surface after rain and disappear within a day. I kept buying amendments, bagged compost, slow release fertilizers, worm castings at prices that made me wince, and the plants grew, but never the way I expected. I told myself it was the climate, or the variety, or something I hadn't figured out yet. What I didn't understand was that I was treating symptoms. The soil biology was depleted, and no amount of added nutrition was going to fix that without fixing the underlying environment first. The shift happened almost by accident. I started adding small amounts of grounds consistently, not because I had a method, but because I had grounds every morning. After 3 weeks, I dug into that bed and felt the difference before I even looked at it. Looser. That clean, earthy smell that good soil has and depleted soil doesn't. 6 weeks in, that bed was producing more than it had in the previous 2 seasons combined. I wasn't working harder. I was finally working with the right system. Now, there are 4 mistakes I see people make consistently when they try this. At least one of them will probably surprise you. The first is applying grounds dry and in thick layers. You already know why this is a problem. But it's the most common starting point and the one most likely to make people quit before the method has a real chance. The second is irregular application. The method works because of rhythm and accumulation. When people apply grounds for a few days, skip a week, then apply heavily to compensate, the microbial community never stabilizes. Consistency matters more than quantity. The third is using grounds from flavored or heavily processed coffees without checking what's in them. Flavored coffees sometimes contain oils or chemical additives that persist through brewing and don't behave the same way in soil. Standard brewed coffee, plain, no additives, is what this method is built around. The fourth mistake is the one most people don't see coming. They stop the applications the moment results appear. They see the earthworms, the darker soil, the plants responding, and they assume the job is done. So they stop. And within 2 to 3 weeks, the biological activity that was building starts to slow. The microbial community needs continued small inputs to maintain the population levels you built. The 28-day window isn't the end of the process, it's the foundation of an ongoing practice that takes almost no effort once you build the habit. If you made it this far and you're already planning your first application, subscribe and leave a like. It helps more people find this kind of practical, no-nonsense content. And drop a comment telling me what your soil situation looks like right now. I read every single one. The last piece of this is the one that pulls everything together, what the soil actually looks and feels like on day 28, and what that means for everything you grow going forward. On day 28, if you've been consistent, there's a moment worth pausing for. Dig your hand into the bed, not with a tool, just your fingers. What you'll feel is different from what you started with. The soil moves with you instead of resisting. It's loose without being sandy, structured without being hard. There's a slight give to it, like something that's been broken in properly. If you bring a small handful close and smell it, there's that deep mineral earthiness that tells you something living is happening in there. Not the smell of wet dirt after rain, something richer, more permanent. Look at the surface. The color is darker and more even than it was 4 weeks ago. When you water, you'll watch it absorb quickly. No pooling, no runoff, just the water going where it needs to go. And when you come back the next morning, the top layer will still hold some of that moisture instead of drying out completely the way it used to. This is what the method actually builds, not a quick fix. A functioning soil environment, your plants feel it before you see it in the numbers. The root systems have been expanding into soil that's easier to move through, with more contact points for nutrient exchange and less stress from compaction and drought cycles. Above ground, that shows up as steadier growth, deeper leaf color, and a kind of resilience that's hard to pin down until you've experienced it. Plants that used to struggle through dry spells hold up better. Plants that used to show yellowing between the veins, usually a sign of magnesium or iron stress, start to green up as the soil chemistry stabilizes and those minerals become accessible again. There's something quieter in this too, something that's harder to put into numbers. When your soil is alive, gardening changes a little. You stop fighting the ground and start working with it. The inputs you need go down. The results become more predictable. You start to understand that most of what you were spending money on was compensating for a biology problem that was never going to get fixed by adding more product. That realization is worth more than any single growing season. You had coffee grounds this morning, you'll have them tomorrow, and the morning after that. That's 365 opportunities per year to feed a soil system that will keep improving, keep diversifying its microbial population, keep building the kind of structure that makes everything you plant perform better. All from something you were throwing away. Stop treating your coffee grounds like waste. They're one of the most accessible biological activators most home gardeners will ever have access to. And they've been sitting in your trash can this whole time. If this changed how you think about your soil, subscribe to this channel and hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find content like this. And tell me in the comments, are you going to try the 28-day method and what are you growing right now? I want to hear from you.